Hi, welcome to episode 2 of Snipe Hunting, a podcast where I explore a Boy Scout ritual and the ways in which it can teach us lots about spiritual transformation and non-dualism. In our first episode, we explored the idea of a snipe hunt. It's a Boy Scout routine where you find the new guy on your first night out camping and tell him about the glorious snipe, how the campsite you're at is one of the best places to go find them, and the time of the year is the best time for snipes to be out and around. And so the whole gathering goes out, the whole troop, but one by one, all the experienced scouts, they find excuses to head back to the camp. And they leave the poor new kid alone. Today, we're going to explore section 2 of chapter 1 of my book, Snipe Hunting. I'm presenting this as a podcast because this feels like an important and messy collection of thoughts and reflections. And I'm really interested in hearing about what hits home and what seems hard to wrap heads around and what just doesn't seem helpful or interesting to even hear about. So today we'll go to reflection number 2 and we'll close with a spiritual practice. Welcome to Snipe Hunting. When I was in my mid-20s, I had a certain life plan for myself. And if you're older and wiser than I was at that time, you'll have a better sense than I did about how those kinds of life plans usually go. I was, at the time, a chunk of the way through a master's program in philosophy. The big picture for me was to become a professor. I would tell people that my intention was to climb up an ivory tower, lock myself in, and throw away the key. The idea of being unfettered was important to me. Kids and a wife? Not for this dude. The family I had been born into was pretty great. The family I had chosen also loved me deeply. I wanted to grow old living the life I had at that time. When I consider that possibility now, I want to laugh, but it would be a sad laugh. Somehow, I had accepted the idea that being over 21 meant I was fully grown up. It really lacks so much imagination, that view. The idea that I would still be the same at 50 that I was at 25 didn't seem terrifying or pathetic at that time. Now, it is most definitely both. When I met Kylie at the bookstore we were both working at, I figured she would be another participant in a long line of great loves. My plan was serial monogamy. My area of philosophy was the philosophy of religion, and even more specifically, a little cul-de-sac inside that wide field known as religious pluralism. Religious pluralism is an exploration into whether different religions might, in some sense, be pointing at the same ultimate reality. I was and am deeply interested in spiritual things. I was and am captivated by this Jesus person we hear so much about. I was and am rather ambivalent about many of the Christians I met. Actually, that's not quite right. Today, I am ambivalent about many of the Christians I meet. At the time I met Kylie, I was cynical and held myself as superior to most of the Christians that I met. This was a little bit of a problem because it turns out that Kylie was a Christian and is to this day, just like those folks that I liked to feel so superior to. I am living proof of that old cliche, the one about how when man plans, God laughs. I had intended to work with affluent, successful college kids, teaching them abstractions and theoretical learning that, honestly, wouldn't impact very much their everyday life. And I ended up a special educator. I spent over 2 decades working with kids that had such significant behavioral challenges that they were removed from their homes. In terms of academic skills, if they were only a few years behind their general education peers, they were in good shape. It is not glamorous work. If a person had to choose the exact opposite of a philosophy professor, I think it would have been that exact job I landed in. I had planned to be unmarried, and I ended up marrying Kylie. I planned to be childless, and I ended up with 3 amazing kids. Amidst all these changes to my life plans, there was another more internal one. I eventually became a Christian. I had a pretty tight-knit circle of friends and family in my mid-20s. I think many of the people who knew me back then were the most surprised by this change. I remember going on the tour of Universal Studios as a teenager. The tour guide has this whole spiel that is apparently true. They were talking about filming avalanches. As it would turn out, for some reason, real rocks look fake on film. Fake rocks, apparently, look more real. Correspondingly, there are a lot of aspects of my story that wouldn't work in a fictional tale of a person finding religion. The things that happen to me are embarrassingly cliched, but they actually happened. My real rocks, the actual story of how this all occurred, they don't appear realistic at all. Similarly, if I was going to construct a convincing story, I would have to lean into the fake rocks of a completely fabricated tale. For example, the night I decided that I was a Christian, the entire Northeast was rocked by this tremendous storm. I had moved back to Massachusetts as an adult to raise my kids. And here in this home I'd returned to, the rain was coming down in what I could only call biblical proportions. The idea that this would happen seems like such a made-up sentiment. Seems like something they'd only put in books. When I would tell you that the thunderclaps were rattling the windows in their panes. And yet, I have such a clear memory of that. Giant raindrops splattering into the glass and the deep rumbles shaking the wooden frames. They call that the pathetic fallacy, when the goings-on for a character somehow mirror the internal landscape. I suppose they call it that because the very idea is pathetic. The real world doesn't ordinarily work like that. We had been attending this moderate American evangelical church. The thing that had always stood in my way of accepting their theology about the nature of Jesus' death. Like most evangelical outfits, they were shockingly unaware of how narrow their views were. For them, there was only one right answer about this. I loved the people. I loved the services. I loved the music and the community. I couldn't make it make any kind of sense at all. Before that, I couldn't understand why Jesus had to die so that I could live forever in heaven. If Kylie hadn't been such an amazing example for me, if it hadn't felt like somehow she had something that I so desperately wanted, I don't think I could have done it as much as I wanted to. Joining the church felt like some sort of negotiation, and I thought that there were these non-negotiables for them. I had to begin, in their view, with the basic premise that there was something wrong with me. I had to move on to the idea that Jesus, who had not deserved it, had died in order to make that wrong thing right. And I had to see, believe, and pray in a certain way in order to have the wrongness within me made right. The whole thing felt vaguely like a class action lawsuit. The wrongness inside me was a little bit like the wrongness that some sort of company might kind of do. And the death of Jesus felt like those obscure trials that go on where the judges determine just exactly how much money each of the people that was harmed are going to receive. And figuring out how you had to pray or believe or think, that was kind of like how you had to fill out those forms online in order to get your share of the settlement. As I looked at these negotiations between myself and the church, it felt like they had ceded quite a lot to me already. They knew I believed in evolution, and yet they accepted me. They knew that I was politically progressive, and they were willing to keep me around. I thought believing their one explanation for the nature of the crucifixion was just a fair thing to do, given that it seemed like they'd already given so much. In the middle of the storm, I told myself that I had made that explanation work for me. By the end of that long night, I could say with something like integrity that the whole scheme, it was maybe making enough sense to me that I could sign on to it. I do think that claim was an exaggeration, a simplification. In my mind, I had made some kind of progress. I had done some rationaling. I had stumbled onto other historical Christians' explanations for what the cross meant that didn't seem quite so distasteful to me. And I told myself that really, all those explanations were the same. It was kind of a messy stew of things which happened in my mind all at once. Did I mention that my beloved Kylie was in the hospital through this whole thing, and as far as I knew at those very moments might have been dying? We had 2 kids by then. She had retained some placenta from the birth of our second, who was at that time a newborn. It was a big, dramatic thing that night when I decided I would worship Jesus. If it wouldn't play as particularly believable with the thunderclaps and the souls and lives on the line, it couldn't certainly be faulted for being dramatic. This is quite the opposite of a different thing that had happened years before. I know that this podcast is called Snipe Hunting, and I know that last time I mentioned that the Boy Scout snipe hunt is an informative symbol for some of the things we're looking at here. I also know that we haven't even touched on this snipe hunting stuff today with these reflections, so let me leave you with this. There are ways that I did not fit with what the Boy Scouts seemed to be looking for. I was not particularly adventurous, athletic, or traditional. When I decided whether I wanted to be one or not, I had to decide if I could make myself fit. I think if I hadn't put myself through that process, I never would have known how to engage in those negotiations with myself, as I wondered if I could be an evangelical. We need groups, belonging, and community. and they need to have some level of conformity. I'm not blaming the Boy Scouts or the church, because these acts are necessary. But as we move further into the spiritual significance of snipe hunting, I'd like to name this negotiation that we do as something which occurs. Once, I would have been interested in assessing, is this all good or bad? These days, I'm so convinced that it's such a fundamental part of human society that the question of whether it's good or bad, that's basically irrelevant. This is also necessary, that there's basically no alternative. That brings us to the end of reflection number 2 of snipe hunting. Stay tuned for today's spiritual practice, where we'll continue to explore ways to at least temporarily shed aspects of ourselves as we look for what resides underneath. Today's contemplative practice is going to be a modified version of the Riverside Meditation. Originally, the Riverside Meditation was a Buddhist practice primarily aimed at eliminating or reducing the number of thoughts. The idea is that a practitioner would imagine them sitting themselves down by a gently flowing river. And each time a thought entered their head, they would place them on the river, perhaps on a leaf, so that it could gently flow by with the course of the current. In snipe hunting, we're more focused on aspects of our identity. So while we're doing this practice today, you could certainly place any stray thoughts you might have along the river. But we're mostly going to be focused on placing pieces of ourselves there. I find that these sorts of practices are somehow both liberating and a little bit scary at the same time. Of course, you can always feel free to hold on to any aspects of your identity you'd like, but do know that all of these will be available for you at the end of the practice once we're done. So let's begin. Imagine that you're sitting by a beautiful river. The temperature is just perfect, and there's a rock or perhaps a bench placed right in front of the gently flowing water. You can look out and see a slow current moving the water along. There's a few debris along the top, twigs and leaves, and you see them floating gently by. Now, we'll begin with the roles you play within your family system. You might be a mother or daughter, a father or son, a wife or a husband, a widow, single person, boyfriend, girlfriend, best friend. We'll take 30 seconds to think about all of these relational connections with the people that we're related to. wish, you can place your fingers or even your foot in the cool water and feel its movement around your hand or foot. Place that identity onto the gently flowing stream and watch your family relationships just to be taken out of view. Now, bring to mind your wider social connections. You have been friend to many across your life. You're a co-worker, colleague, perhaps a supervisor or a supervisee. There might be other classroom or professional connections. We'll spend 30 seconds bringing those to mind now. Place this wider network of social connections on the river. You can still have them, but they're not defining a part of your identity. And think about the things that you do. Jobs, titles, certificates, diplomas, the school or workplace you attend, the classes you study or the tasks you undertake. Think about the things you do for fun. Think about the things you do out of obligation. Think about the things you do for school or work. Bring those activities to mind over these next 30 seconds. Gently place these tasks on the river. Watch the current bring it out of the sight. And now we come to the things that we believe. Many of our beliefs might be related to spirituality and religion, to politics. Think about the things you believe that are easily put into words. Think about the things you believe that you would have no words for. Consider the things that others have taught you about the world, and bring to mind the sort of things that you've had to learn on your own. Hold on to the things that you've known for a long time and bring to mind the things that you're learning right now. Find yourself in that riverside and spend these next 30 seconds thinking about the things that you believe. Might wish to see a rather large leaf, and perhaps you can put the things that you think about, the things that you believe, right on that gently flowing leaf. You can bid it a fond farewell as it rolls down the river and out of sight. Now, consider the various feelings that come through your mind and body. One way to pull together a pretty consistent list is to think about the last day or two and all the feelings you felt at that time. Run yourself through these last couple days and just make a catalog mentally of all the feelings that you have felt. We'll take 30 seconds to do that now. Place the feelings that come through your mind. You can be One way to pull together a pretty consistent list is to think about the last day or two and all the feelings you felt at that time. Run yourself through these last couple days and just make a catalog mentally of all the feelings that you have felt. We'll take 30 seconds to do that now. Place the feelings that come through your mind and body right there on the river. You can be empty of them. Now, consider the thoughts that come into your head. Some of these thoughts can be helpful, others may not be. Many of them might surprise you and come without you even looking for them. Pay attention to the thoughts that are rising up in this time now, and use this Riverside meditation in its more traditional manner, placing the thoughts on the river. We'll take 30 seconds to do that now. Feel a gentle breeze come in, rustling the leaves on the trees, carrying to you a subtle scent of the wildflowers nearby. Look upriver, see the gentle windings of your stream. Look downriver in the direction that so many aspects of yourself have been carried. Whatever is left within, place that on the river so that you can feel totally empty. We'll spend 30 seconds gathering what pieces of you are within and releasing that part of your identity, preparing to release that part of your identity as well. Very good. We'll wrap this spiritual practice up with a summary of where we are, feeling the release of releasing our aspects of our identity, sitting by the riverside, having given up the roles that we play, the things that we do, all that we believe, the feelings that come up for us, the thoughts that come into our mind, and even the portions of our identity which might remain. We'll take 2 minutes to luxuriate in this feeling of having made room within for whatever is happening now. Then we'll wrap up our audio recording, but know that you can continue in this place of beautiful emptiness either today or anytime you wish to return to the riverside.